It's 1046 BC. You're robed in vibrant colored silk, woven in the colors green, red, golden yellow, silver, white, and blue. You're wearing a jade pendant because it protects you from evil spirits, carved into the form of a dragon, an emblem that goes as far back as 8000 BC, Neolithic China. You're wearing a headdress of feathers, bronze, and cowrie shells, markers of what you do. You have on embroidered shoes, an indicator that you are part of the elite. You hold a sheep bone over the flames of a pyre. The power of the gods is in the flame. Fire is the medium through which gods and humans pass information to one another. It's a channel for interaction and exchange. It's why we burn incense, why we burn sacrificial offerings. Smoke rises to the heavens. Fire clearly is a bridge between worlds. When the gods whisper to you, it is ready, you remove that bone from the fire and you strike it with an iron spike. The bone cracks to form lines like rivulets and rivers. You read those lines because you are a shaman. We will receive an abundant millet harvest, you say, phrased as a divination charge, a way to seal in the full force and effect of the auspicious reading. You also consult the heavenly stems to determine timing. You read the stars alongside the bones. If the divination was negative, you would invoke the Eastern Mother and Western Mother, the four guardian spirits, and all the great shamans of your ancestral line, from which you have inherited this power, this duty, this calling to be the chief Wu of your clan. That Neolithic world of the Wu is where we begin, and from there we are going to trace the evolution of the Wu through the dynasties. Our focus will be on what that word on screen you see traveling across the timeline as written in oracle bone script has meant across various periods of Chinese history, and how the practices and traditions of the indigenous Chinese Wu were later absorbed into Taoism and its esoteric and mystical traditions today. We are going to examine how this word Wu was used in the Shang Dynasty oracle bones, texts from the Zhou Dynasty, ancient dictionaries and encyclopedias, court documents, the I Ching, Huangdi Neijing, or inner canons of the Yellow Emperor, Zhuangzi, Confucius himself, and Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, and the ways the scope of use of this word Wu evolved into the present day. Short summary spoiler alert, it's a fairly generic term that even historically has covered a lot of ground. Diviner, astrologer, spirit medium, physician, scribe, scholar, historian, clergy, even warrior, someone with the charisma and political savvy to be king, a leader. And so I would like to argue the case for covering all of these social and occupational roles into what it means today to be, well, this word, and how to triangulate three languages, three cultural traditions, the historical Chinese, the etymological Evenki or Tungusic origins of the word shaman, and the English language today. Finally, I hope that for yourself you are able to extract universal or core insights from this presentation of my culture and history. In presenting this material, I am and always will be first and foremost a lay practitioner. This is the living tradition that I was born into, a cultural practice that I was raised on, that I watched and witnessed and experienced every single day from early childhood, and that I fine-tune and cultivate each and every day right now, that defines and governs my lifestyle to this day. And yet, for this particular presentation, I will also be leaning into my academic background. I've previously been published in multiple peer-reviewed law journals, though my published academic research and analysis has always been more in the realm of feminist jurisprudence, antitrust laws, healthcare laws, and IP, intellectual property. But I transfer those core research and analysis skills to, well, shamanism and Taoism, I guess. I also wrote this book 9 years ago, and this book a couple of years ago, so there's also that. Nevertheless, proof is always in the pudding, so I hope this work product speaks for itself.
Also, if this long-form, freely accessible, ad-free lecture format is something you want to see more of, then please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment below.
We begin with geography. The darkened blue line you see on screen is the Yellow River, and hence the reference Yellow River, Cradle of Civilization. You might be familiar with this pictorial, the Luo-Shu magic square, which according to lore originates from the Luo River, a tributary of the Yellow River located where you see that arrow pointing, revealed to the shamanic King Yu the Great during the Shang Dynasty. Pottery, dated between 5000 and 3000 BC, shows the earliest symbols we have that the character Wu originates from. The symbol marks the 4 directions, and its stylized representations on the pottery are believed to represent the Big Dipper, and therefore both space and time, astrology and geomancy. How? Why? More on that later. The Shang Dynasty, as referenced in Zhou and early historical texts, gives us the legend of Yu the Great and how the Luo-Shu magic square was revealed to him, an emblem of how to master control over the Big Dipper, space and time, astrology, and geomancy, the cornerstone map of all universes and spiritual planes to guide the Wu. During the Shang Dynasty, 1600 BC to 1046 BC, the occupational role of the Wu is institutionalized, and we start to infer that this is someone who is a rainmaker to ensure good harvests, a healer, a religious leader of sorts, a history or story keeper, an astrologer or timekeeper, a military strategist, and also in many ways the first cultural anthropologist. Basically, Wu are subject matter experts. The tail end of the Shang and start of the Zhou is when we get the I Ching Book of Changes. This is also the era of Laozi, Confucius, and Zhuangzi. Note the area shaded in blue because when we say China during the Zhou dynasty, that's what we mean, just that part. Meanwhile, another cradle of civilization, the Indus River Valley during the Vedic period, holds much greater influence in what is now modern-day southern China. And it's during this period that we see artifacts of Buddhism in the southern regions, whereas Buddhism has not quite reached the north, or China, the Yellow River civilization, as we know it during the Zhou dynasty. Culturally, the north and the south is quite fractured and distinct, and this is going to set the tone for how culture and traditions evolve over the next 2 millennia. Qin Shi Huang is the first to unite the north and south of China, in a manner of speaking. This is the era of the Great Wall, the Terracotta Army, and when we attribute the standardization of our writing system and of a form of whole science astrology along with the Chinese lunar-solar calendar.
We rely on Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian for cultural context about the Wu in the Pre-Qin era. The Wu were healers, early physicians, pharmacologists, but also they used divination and astrology to diagnose problems, be that disease or political turmoil. They were also in charge of purification rites, rain dances to bring a good harvest, and last rites, meaning they helped the soul transition into the afterlife. The Wu were considered almost divine, able to receive secret messages from the gods and spirits, and then transmitted those secrets secretly to the emperor. In some cases, they were in fact divine, and that was the explanation for their godlike powers, their magic. There are also descriptions of the Wu in the south, the state of Yue, and what southern Wu were like. They're very superstitious when it comes to ghosts, says Sima Qian, and their Wu performed rituals upon a platform rather than before an altar or temple, and dancing rituals were performed on these platforms used to honor the gods and heaven. Also, these Wu of the southern clans used chickens for divination. This is likely a reference to chicken bone divination, which existed since the Shang Dynasty. First, the chicken must have been a sacrificial offering to the gods. Then the two femurs of the chicken are used for the divination. Basically, for us modern folk, the bigger bone in the drumstick. How these two femur bones are used in divination will vary from clan to clan, region to region. There's this line statement from the Zhou dynasty text, Discourses on the State. Every clan, every tribe, every lineage and tradition has a shaman, one with learned knowledge in the craft. Specifically, it comes out of the chapter on the Kingdom of Yue. Yue was a southern city-state during the period of the Zhou dynasty. Why I want to share that passage is this. It's conveying the idea that every community has a figure who embodies this role of both a shaman, one who communes with spirits, an intermediary, and someone who is a keeper of records, a scribe. This is one who transmits knowledge, but also preserves knowledge, ritual, myths, and moral teachings for our future generations.
For the purposes of this conversation, I will be translating Wu to shaman as used in English, in spite of this word being a loan word that has a distinct, narrowly tailored scope of meaning within its language of origin.
This free public course is taught half by this video lecture and half by text, so I expand upon semantics in the text portion linked in the video description box.
You'll also see the term translated to witch, wizard, or sorcerer, or spirit medium. However you want to translate it, the Wu is someone who is going to be knowledgeable in the 6 modalities of craft you see at the bottom of the screen.
Now let's explore the historical context of East Asian shamanism to demonstrate how and why Wu culture and spirituality is one out of the 2 most important influences on what we now understand today as Chinese culture and spirituality.
To do that, we need to go back in time and study the Shang and Zhou dynasties. That's 1600 to 1046 BC for the Shang and about 1046 BC to 256 BC for the Zhou. We'll start by referencing one of the most authoritative texts on etymology dated back to the 1st century. On the meaning of the word Wu, we define this term as one whose incantations hold power. Women who are Wu have a particular knack for detecting the unseen. In all, they summon spirits through dance. Zhu here, meaning incantation, is of particular note.
This word means incantations, speech, modes of persuasion, but it also means the creative and sustaining force of the universe channeled through words, truth, and reason, rational principles.
The text notes that Wu Xian is the primordial ancestor or ascended master of all Wu, which is to say, if you identify as this, then this guy is your ancestor. Who is Wu Xian? According to the Book of Worlds, dating back to the Zhou dynasty, Wu Xian performs divinations. He's the first, according to lore, to learn how to commune with the gods and spirits through these methods of divination. He discovers these methods of divination through astrology and Yarrow stalks. And so fundamentally, if you are this, then you inherit from this guy, your ancestor, the innate ability to perform divinations by way of these methodologies, astrology and, well, the I Ching, or methods of divination likened to the I Ching. Heck, according to that ancient dictionary, the meaning of divination is using the hexagrams of the I Ching Book of Changes, whereby the etymological origins of this ideogram, notes the text, is the combination of Yarrow stalks and the Wu, which is to say it is the Wu who performs divinations with I Ching.
Recall how we said earlier that in the 1st century AD, the most important principle that defines the Wu or shaman is the power of the incantations, of the words spoken, the songs sung, to be the storyteller, the truth teller, dream teller, one who interprets dreams, the fortune teller.
There's another character, Wu, pronounced, yes, the same way as Wu the shaman. This second word, Wu, describes those incantations of the Wu shaman that hold power. This second Wu term indicates the words and sound that store, transmit, and process power, the power to enforce a will. This part of each Chinese character you see on screen means mouth, means what is uttered from the mouth. Let's recap. Words and sound store, transmit, and process power. The Wu is someone whose incantations, whose words and sound hold extraordinary, inordinate levels of power over others. Wu, another word that sounds like the word for shaman, means the magical words spoken by the shaman, though this can also include writing, which is why you often see the character Wu alongside the character for scribe, for instance, as found in the I Ching, Book of Changes, hexagram 57. Which is to say that writing, speech, is a magical act. Hence the divination charges written onto the oracle bones after the divination to seal in the power. Words are vessels for divine or cosmic energy. Inscriptions serve as conduits between the human and spirit worlds. Writing characters during ritual is how you invoke and channel supernatural forces. The act of inscribing divination charges onto oracle bones was itself magical because it formalized and concretized intent. Taoist magical practices like sigils and talismans are based on the same shamanic principle. Fu talismans are the heart of Taoist magical practice, where the act of ritualized writing was a way to bind intent into the physical world. Writing, speech, incantations are an extension of the magic and authority of the practitioner. We'll close out the etymology lesson with this definition of yi, meaning doctor, physician, one who treats illnesses, noting that Wu Peng was the first healer, the primordial ancestor of all physicians and medical providers. A doctor, by definition, is a type of Wu, a subset of the Wu shaman or witch, or however you want to translate this word. Today, this character yi means medicine, physician. The top half of this ideogram shows a quiver for a crossbow and arrows and an ancient weapon made of bamboo or wood. It means injury, pain, or the groaning sound one makes when you are in pain. And this bottom half of the ideogram means medicinal wine. And here's how this same character used to be written, with the bottom root radical being Wu the shaman, or witch, as the one who heals injuries and pain.
Meaning the first doctors and pharmacologists of the Yellow River civilizations were shamans, witches, or at least one of the 9 sub-archetypes of the shaman, the Wu.
In the seminal text, Classic of Mountains and Seas, dated to the 4th century BC, there's a section describing the 10 Wu, the 10 primordial shamans. Xian is the chief among all Wu, our primordial ancestor, the unity of the below 9 archetypes of the Wu shaman. So he is the first and the 10th, 10 representing wholeness of all domains of the Wu. Among the 9, Wu Peng is the first doctor, the shaman who heals, the primordial ancestor of all physicians. The 10 Wu also happen to represent the archetypes, the key roles and responsibilities of the shaman. You have the power to ensure prosperity. You have visions and can see beyond what others can see. Your powers can protect and safeguard, can ward and shield. You are a moral compass for the people. You help to maintain balance in the cosmos. You perform the death rites to help people in the transition into the afterlife. You receive divine revelations. You are a divine channel. You possess the power, knowledge, and gift of healing, and you perform the ceremonial rites to venerate the gods and ancestors. And it's through working with the Luo-Shu magic square that you master the 9 archetypes to fully and wholly embody the shaman in the transcendent state. The Ba Gua 8 trigrams are the forces of nature you must learn to harness and alchemize, and they guide the scope of both Chinese shamanism and Taoist metaphysics. On the yin side of the practice, this is mediumship, exorcisms, banishing rites, and herbal remedies. Yin for the liquid carrier that is most medicines. On the yang side, divination, astrology, rites and rituals to the gods, and crafting Fu talismans. The 9 of the Luo-Shu magic square and the 9 archetypes of the shaman's skill set square the circle or cycle formed by the 8 trigrams. Circling with the 8 is a square of 9. This is the most fundamental and foundational metaphysical principle in Wu shamanism, but also in Taoist magic. Recall earlier both of these words, Wu, one representing Wu the shaman, and the second Wu representing the power of the voice of the shaman. We start by citing from the Huangdi Neijing, the Inner Canons of the Yellow Emperor, a seminal text on traditional Chinese medicine. There's this one section where the Yellow Emperor asks his master teacher, the great healer and medicine master Qi Bo, why do shamans use incantations in their rites? This is the same exact character we saw earlier in the ancient dictionary defining the Wu shaman, one whose incantations hold power. His teacher Qi Bo responds, ancient shamans could trace the origin of disease with sound, and thus incantations can heal, which is to say that sound as a medium for harmonizing the unseen is central to healing practice. In fact, healing through sound is a core ability of the Wu shaman.
That passage from the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor, asking why do shamans or witches use incantations in their rituals, and the teacher responding, ancient shamans could trace the origin of illness with sound, and so incantations were used to heal. It's an oft-quoted and oft-cited passage from the Inner Canons on energy healing, sound being a form of mechanical energy. The vibrations can travel through air, water, and solid objects. Sound can shatter glass. It can vibrate instrument strings near it through resonance, and, according to shamanic principles, it can heal. This is why chanting recitations, incantations, are such a core part of both historical Chinese shamanism and Taoist ritual magic today. You also, of course, find it in esoteric Buddhism.
We've just covered the origins and development of Wu shamanism during pre-Qin China. From there, how did Wu shamanism and Taoism become bedfellows? In this next segment, we'll track the evolution of indigenous Chinese shamanism and when it merged with Taoist occultism during imperial China, starting with the Han Dynasty. During the early part of the Han Dynasty, Wu shamans held significant roles in court rituals, divination, and healing practices.
Their functions intertwined with early religious traditions focusing on communicating with spirits, invoking deities, and conducting ceremonies to ensure harmony between heaven and earth. Shamanism was integrated into state rituals and cosmology, especially through the imperial cult of heaven, an early religion we now call Tianism. More on that later. Shamans mediated between the emperor and the divine. However, in the late Han era, Confucianism became dominant in state ideology, relegating shamanism to local or folk practices. See, during the early Han Dynasty, witchcraft was still common among all classes. However, when Emperor Wu of Han promoted Confucianism, society was influenced by Confucius's idea of not talking about monsters, power, chaos, and gods. And if you can't serve people, how can you serve ghosts? Thus, by late Han, shamans no longer held high official status. Confucianism cherry-picked the philosophical elements of Taoism to integrate into its school of thought, but rejected the mystical elements and very much rejected Wu shamanism. So by later Han, especially after we institutionalize the Confucian 4 classes, the shaman is cast to the lower rungs of of society.
In contrast to shamanism, due to imperial patronage, Taoist scholarship flourishes during the later Han, with emperors integrating Taoist philosophical and ideological principles into governance. What the imperial court denied, the people embraced. This is the beginning of Wu shamanism mixing in with Taoism, specifically in the form of secret societies bent on overthrowing the Han Dynasty. Integrating shamanistic elements, Taoist sorcery develops through Zangdaoling and the Way of the Celestial Masters.
Taoist philosophical thought merges with Wu shamanistic historical traditions, becoming the esoteric cornerstones of Taoist secret societies that would also later inform Taoist alchemy. When we talk about a distinction between Taoist philosophy and Taoist religion or mysticism, that bifurcation really became pronounced during the Han Dynasty, 200 BC to 200 AD. Taoist philosophy was associated with the imperial scholars, whereas Taoist occult practices became associated with the rebels who sought to overthrow the imperial court.
By 200 AD, Wu shamanistic practices become increasingly localized and associated with the peasant class and folk traditions. Taoism and Buddhism gain prominence among the elite and are institutionalized by the state. As for Taoism, this is the era of Gehong, Baopuzi, and many other renowned Taoist alchemists and scholars. Taoism expands, particularly among the aristocrats, as a mystical counterpart to Buddhism and integrates esoteric Buddhism into its fold. The stagnation of Wu shamanism and its association with the peasant class continues into the Sui dynasty, 500 to 600 AD, whereas forms of magic and mysticism practiced by the elite were Buddhist-influenced. There is a major revival of interest in Taoist alchemy, especially the pursuit of the elixir of immortality. Several emperors during the Sui supported Taoism to legitimize their rule. Quick sidebar on the Confucianist class system of imperial China. Society is divided into 4 classes: the gentry, the farming class, artisans and craftsmen, and last, merchants and traders. Funny enough, this character, Shang, the lowest socioeconomic class, is also the same word for the ancient Shang dynasty. Previously, during the Shang dynasty, the Wu shaman held the highest status in society, corresponding with the scribe, the scholar, historian, and healer or physician. This was pre-Qin China. Now, during imperial China, the shaman is equated to a folk healer, a spirit medium, and fortune teller, whereas those who are scribes, scholars, historians, and healers or physicians stay up at the top, but now identify as the Taoist aristocrat, and the mysticism of the aristocracy is called alchemy.
While Wu shamanism was prominent in records from the early Han Dynasty, by the end of the Han, these shamanistic practices were absorbed into records associated with Taoism. Region-specific folk practice continued through the dynasties among the peasant class, whereas the shamanistic traditions practiced by the aristocracy was referred to within the framework of Taoism.
In the interest of time, we'll touch briefly into Tang, skip a couple centuries, and touch into the Yuan dynasty, the 13th century when China is colonized by foreigners, the Mongols under Kublai Khan. Under the Tang, shamanism becomes fragmented and scattered, with localized and regional pockets of traditions. Much of it becomes integrated into what we now call Chinese folk religion, whereas Taoism becomes a state religion, with emperors identifying themselves as Taoist sages. The Tang royal family claims descent from Lao Tzu or Lao Tzu. Inner alchemy, which absorbs historical shamanistic practices, gains in prominence. In the 13th century Yuan dynasty, Mongolian Tengrism, a shamanistic tradition, is institutionalized as the state religion, and it's referred to as Wu. This is the first time that China is ruled by a non-Han ethnic group, and Mongol governance along with Mongolian shamanism is integrated into Chinese traditions. Taoism faces suppression under the Yuan dynasty, due in large part to Han rebels being affiliated with Taoist secret societies. Instead, Tibetan Buddhism is favored and syncretized into Han religious and spiritual practices. Also in the 13th century, Wu shamanism and Taoism get syncretized with Buddhism.
Taoism gained its traction during the Han and Tang dynasties due to strong imperial support. The Mongolian-ruled Yuan dynasty brought a decline in Taoism in favor of Buddhism, and shamanism regained imperial favor through the institution of Mongolian shamanism, today known as Tengrism, which is strikingly similar to the Shang dynasty practice of Tianism.
There is a particularly important and significant Taoist practice where we can really track the evolution of Wu shamanistic practices and how it got absorbed by Taoist magic and occultism, and that is the enduring significance of the Big Dipper and, by implication, the North Star, and the spiritual map of the universe as a 9-sector square. The Big Dipper is viewed as a celestial gateway connecting the physical world with the spiritual and divine realms. When the Big Dipper's handle points east here in the northern hemisphere, it's spring. When the handle of the Dipper arcs southward in the night sky, it's summer. It points westward in autumn, appearing lower in the northern sky, and in winter the handle points northward. As the Dipper cycles through the 4 seasons, it spirals, forming a circle from the square of 4 directions. That symbol you see emerging from the center on screen is one of the earliest forms of the word Wu for shaman. Also, this particular symbol that is a common motif in Neolithic Chinese pottery and design is believed to be an emblem of the Big Dipper, symbolic of change, of the cycles of nature, time, space, and seasons. The Big Dipper was believed to be a guide for the soul's journey, and the constellations of the Dipper a map for navigating the cosmos. The north, which is where you find the Big Dipper, is the gateway to the underworld and also to heaven. The Big Dipper, true north, is a liminal gateway for journeying to other realms. In the northern hemisphere, here on Earth, at night, if you're lost, all you gotta do is find the Big Dipper, and now you know true north. Once you know true north, you know south, east, and west. You can then mentally draw out the 9-sector grid to form a map of the terrain.
What was passed down from the Shamanistic-Historical Wu to the Taoist mystics today is this belief. Every spirit and astral realm has a Big Dipper equivalent or counterpart in their north. So whether you are in an upper world or an underworld, you can look for the Big Dipper to find true north, and therefore know the 4 directions, know the residence of the 4 guardians, and find your way around that spiritual plane.
The Han Dynasty thinker Yang Xiong writes in his political commentaries, Fa Yan, the ancestral clan of Yu the Great, meaning the primordial ancestors of our shamanic tradition, mastered control of water and soil, and Shui Tu here in this context means everything on the surface of the earth, all events of nature. The shamanic tradition descending from Yu the Great masters control over all events of nature through the pacing ritual of the Wu. That term in the passage, pacing rituals of the Wu shamans, refers to pacing the law, the 9-sector magic square. Yu the Great is a legendary shamanic king who, according to lore, performed a pacing ritual during the Great Floods by the banks of the Luo River, seeking divine guidance. This pacing ritual becomes known as the Steps of Yu. His pacing invokes a goddess who answers by sending a magical tortoise whose shell bore the Luoshu magic square, a 3x3 grid symbolizing balance and harmony across the cosmos. The goddess, of the Luo River reveals to us a sacred calculator with which Yu the Great might tame the great floods, and with which we humans can rectify imbalances, cultivate harmony, and know and understand the great mysteries. This 9-sector Luoshu River map is superimposed with the Bagua 8 trigrams on the premise that this merging reveals the secrets of the universe, allegedly. There is almost no aspect to Taoist magic that doesn't touch into this esoteric principle, that doesn't utilize this square and cycle in some significant way. The dragon tortoise, by the way, corresponds with the north, with the winter solstice, the Wuxing element water, and of darkness, Xuan, the mysteries, unseen forces. Remember these correspondences because they will factor in later in a big way when we talk about pacing the Big Dipper. This magic square, as we Taoist native practitioners of the craft are taught, was secret knowledge first revealed to Yu the Great of the Shang Dynasty, because he was the first shaman, and his pacing ritual plus the revelation of the magic square as a sacred spirit map becomes known as the pacing rituals of the Wu shamans during the Shang Dynasty. The documents dated to the Shang and Zhou dynasties about the Wu pacing rituals refer to this methodology, this tradition of ritual stepping. One of the earliest records we have of these Wu-bu, or shamanic pacing rituals, is from the Zhou dynasty, the winter dragon rites, from the ancient religion we now call Tianism, venerating a sky god, Shang and the Big Dipper gods. The Wu shaman performed the rite facing north, which would be facing the Big Dipper, an important astral realm in Tianism.
Pre-Qin texts describe this Wu pacing ritual as one performed in winter, led by a chief Wu shaman, whereby all of them, these shamans, would be dressed in black, performing these pacing rituals for 6 consecutive days. They set up the platform marked by 4 gates along the 4 directions to call in the 4 directional guardians. There are 2 different types of wine drunk during the ritual, a dark, opaque wine, and then a lighter, clear wine, or liquor. As for Tianism, also oft referred to as the Way of Heaven, Tianzhidao, it starts off as the earliest Shang Dynasty religion encompassing Wu shamanism, but then is later integrated into Taoism, where we find references to the Way of Heaven in the I Ching, the Tao Te Ching, and the Huangdi Neijing. That point right there documents the integration of Wu shamanism into Taoism.
The pacing ritual, a cornerstone of Wu shamanism, evolves through the dynasties. As we noted earlier, it's attributed to Yu the Great through the revelation of the Luo magic square from the goddess upon the back of a dragon tortoise. During the Shang dynasty, the Wu shamans emulate the steps of Yu, these pacing rituals attributed to Yu the Great, and becomes a hallmark practice among the Wu shamans. The pacing traces pathways through the Luoshu magic square. All of this is recorded in texts dated to the Zhou dynasty, documenting the histories of the Xia and Shang dynasties. In the Zhou, there's accounts of a winter dragon rites that bear striking resemblance to the steps of Yu. It is between 200 BC and 200 AD that older shamanic traditions are piecemealed into institutionalized Taoism. During the Han, there is a revival of Tianism, where several notable scholars and historians of this time were Tianists, subscribing to the religion of their ancestors, the Way of Heaven. During the Three Kingdoms era, the pacing the Big Dipper ritual in Taoism is popularized, a descendant of the steps of Yu and earlier shamanic pacing rituals. Records from the Jin dynasty, 266 AD to 420 AD, we have records of pacing the Yu steps, described as the ritual for taking Yu to the abyss, or 9 abysses, the astral realms. In addition to references to the Big Dipper, the 9-sector magic square pacing rituals is tied to the dragon rites, which integrate observations of the north and south lunar nodes, the north node being the dragon's head and the south node being the dragon's tail. By the Shang Dynasty, we've got a very well-established system of ritual magic based on the Luoshu 9 palaces. The concept of Shangdi, the god of heaven, of the skies, from Tianism is syncretized with Tai, the Taoist creation god associated with the North Star, Big Dipper, and cosmic order. Various Taoist grimoires of this time describe and depict these pacing rituals to show how your steps, your pacing across the Luoshu 9 palaces, in combination with incantations, can open up gateways to then take you to other realms.
We're going to continue this conversation about pacing the Big Dipper rituals in a future video dedicated to the subject, so stay tuned.
As a fun teaser, though, here's one example of a pacing ritual within the family of Big Dipper pacing rituals, translated into English as the Jade Maiden crossing the Great River. The Jade Maiden or Jade Maidens, be that singular or plural, refer to the attendants of the Lady of the 9 Heavens, and the river implies the 9 palaces spirit map. As you pace across the 9 palaces, you draw a chi from the 8 trigrams, and at each step, your mind shifts from focus to focus, vision to vision, corresponding to the 8 trigrams. This pacing ritual recreates the celestial journey of the Jade Maidens, divine attendants and messengers in Taoist cosmology, who serve as psychopomps that guide you across the river of the underworld, suggesting a passage across dimensions. The objective of this pacing ritual is to meet the mysterious Lady of the 9 Heavens, so that she might bestow you with mystical teachings, martial arts prowess, and divine wisdom, corresponding with the Bagua 8 trigrams that ultimately endows you with the power to break through any barrier. In a previous video on my channel, we covered Guan Luoying, Journeying to the Underworld, where a spirit map of the Luoshu 9 palaces is your guide to the terrain and architectural layout of the underworld, or inner world as I prefer to conceptualize it. The layout of your inner palace follows this 9-sector configuration. We connect the practice of Guan Luoying to the Wu shamanistic practices of the Mingyue people, Mingyue Wu Fa, circa 300 to 100 BC. You need to know the Luoshu magic square so you can find the western gate. You enter the underworld through the western gate because the west corresponds with the setting sun, nightfall. This map of the underworld is also a map of the heavens and the horoscopic grid from the earliest records of Chinese astrology. Xian 5-star divination is older than 246 BC, but we have a document excavated from a tomb dated to 246 BC describing this ancient form of astrological divination already popular by 246 BC. It follows a sidereal system that focuses on the 5 planets: Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. You interpret the yin aspect of each of the 5 planets by triangulating its position with the moon, and the yang aspect of the 5 planets by triangulating its positioning with the sun. Instead of the horoscopical wheel of 12 houses you're more familiar with in Western astrology, this ancient astrological system utilized a grid of 9. This same grid of 9 is the basis for the I Ching, for Chinese geomancy and feng shui, as we'll explain in the next section, and even the grid used in Shang Dynasty oracle bone and tortoise shell divination. You look up at the sky and map out a 9-sector grid, then plot the location of Mercury, Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn within the 9 sectors you see in the sky. The correspondences for the 9 sectors in 5-star astrology mirrors that of many other divination systems, including how oracle bones were read. Triangulating with the sun and moon to read read both yang and yin facets of each of the 5, you read the elemental dignities. Focus on the palace that the planet occupies. Note whether the element of the palace and the element of the planet create a positive charge or a negative charge. Numbers as configured per the magic square are also significant, acting as symbolic carriers of frequencies that interact with the electromagnetic forces of the universe. The numbers 1 through 9, through their encoded vibrations, can influence energy fields in the same way electrical signals and sound waves influence the material world. The same 9 palaces magic square is the foundation of feng shui. Once again, mapping the grid follows the 4 directions. And for those of you familiar with basic feng shui principles and recognize this luo-shu grid you see on screen, the correspondences for each sector, as it was in astrology, are based on numerology, the wuxing 5 elements, and the bagua 8 trigrams. Whether it's feng shui or the principles of magic and witchcraft, if you seek peace and harmony, avoid fire-water oppositions. And same goes for thunder-lake oppositions. Think lightning striking the surface of a lake. It creates a small explosion, a shock wave, symbolic of instability and conflict. In both feng shui and what we call feng shui cures, forms of basic folk magic, how qi flows from southeast to northwest determines health and well-being. How qi flows from northeast to southwest determines your financial success and prosperity. Easiest way to master feng shui intuitively: what the flow of qi through the area touches will change the properties of that qi.
So in feng shui, if there's a lot of clutter or decaying trash everywhere, the qi flowing in that area is constantly touching clutter and trash, so it becomes atrophic, harmful qi. You being constantly exposed to that atrophic, harmful qi will impact your luck, health, and prosperity. Whereas if there are certain talismans, amulets, and magically charged items that the flow of qi in your home is constantly touching, it becomes beneficent qi. You being constantly exposed to that beneficent qi will elevate your luck, health, and prosperity. These very, very old shamanistic principles of how the realms are configured is applied today in feng shui principles and modern witchcraft. By the way, whether feng shui is a form of witchcraft is a very interesting question.
As early as the 11th century BC, we have archaeological records of the heavenly stems and earthly branches calendar system. This is the lunar-solar 60-point calendar system, 5 cycles of 12, 6 cycles of 10, referenced by the Shang and Zhou dynasty shamans for astrology, divination, and truly all aspects of government, council, and life. This is the same lunar-solar calendar system, 10 heavenly stems and 12 earthly branches used in Taoist ritual magic today. 0 to 9, the single digits correspond with the 10 heavenly stems, subdivided into yin and yang aspects of each of the 5 elements. This runs parallel to the 5-star astrology system we talked about earlier, where you read each of the 5 planets through yin and yang aspects of the sun and moon. The 12 earthly branches correspond with the 12 animals of the Chinese zodiac based on Jupiter cycle observations, the Jupiter cycle of 12 years. This also corresponds with the 12 ascendant hours. Study of the 6 pairings of 10 heavenly stems and 12 earthly branches and their wuxing 5 elemental correspondences, which we also call ba zi, the 4 pillars of destiny, and how they configure into the 9 sectors that square the cycle of 8 trigrams, integrated with the study of the I Ching Oracle of Change, will endow you with, and this is true, knowledge and understanding of all secrets of the cosmos, all parallel worlds, and more pragmatically, the major Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Japanese divination and metaphysical systems.
This lunar-solar heavenly stems and earthly branches system with the Luoshu 9 Palaces magic square dates back to the Shang Dynasty used by Wu shamans in divination and astrology. And today, this system is the bedrock of Taoist metaphysics. It's a clear example of how Wu shamanistic traditions were integrated into Taoism.
Another legacy of Wu shamanism we still see present today absorbed into folk Taoism is how the pantheon of gods we find referenced in the Shang Dynasty oracle bones became the pantheon of Taoist gods and goddesses. Here we are referencing the works of Cheng Mengjia, an archaeologist considered an authority on oracle bones, Chinese mythology, ancient Chinese religion, and the Shang Dynasty. Professor Chen's study of Shang oracle bones and artifacts identified 8 key deities in the early Chinese pantheon: a sky god, earth goddess, sun deity, moon or river goddess, mother goddesses of the east and west respectively, a mountain god, and a wind god. These deities align with the Ba Gua 8 trigrams: heaven, earth, fire, water, thunder, lake, wind, and mountain. These deities were like personifications of the cycle of nature, and we see how these 8 trigrams and 8 gods correspond to seasonal markers like the equinoxes and solstices, and the solar degrees of the Chinese lunar-solar calendar corresponding with the start of spring, start of summer, autumn, and winter.
One more fun connection.
Recall Yu the Great, who performs a pacing ritual by the Luo River, which invokes the goddess who sends a magical tortoise to deliver the revelation of the Luo 9 Palaces magic square, which is the secret for decoding any mystery of the universe. Records dated to 400 BC describe a Luo River goddess, which later gets syncretized with Tai Xuannu, Lady of the Great Mysteries.
Tai Xuannu was widowed at a young age, pursued Taoist cultivation and the art of jade. She attained the power to influence governments, kingdoms, and cities, and was in possession of this magical staff that she would knock on rocks, and then gateways to other worlds would open. These accounts are sourced from the famous alchemist Ge Hong's text, Legends of the Immortals, where he dedicated a whole chapter on Tai Xuannu, the Lady of the Great Mysteries. You may recall that name, Ge Hong, from my previous video, the most influential grimoire in Taoist practice, Bao Pu Zi. That was Ge Hong.
The Lady of the Great Mysteries is a bit reminiscent of the mysterious Lady of the Nine Heavens. Tai Xuannu, syncretized from the shamanic tradition of the river goddess, revealer of the Luoshu 9-sector magic square, becomes Zhou Tian Xuannu, Lady of the Nine Heavens, a Taoist goddess associated with the esoterica, occult practice, divination, astrology, and inner alchemy. She is the 9th, that is the summation of the 8 primordial nature gods, that is the legacy of Wu shamanism, which just so happen to correspond with the 8 trigrams, which is symbolic of both space, physical elements, and time, the seasonal cycle, space squared by the 4 directions, time squared by the 4 solar festivals, or quarter days. The cycle of nature can be harnessed and tamed with the occult science of the Luoshu, the mystery of the 9 palaces, achieved by invoking the Lady of the 9 Heavens, who is the Taoist manifestation of the Luo River goddess of Wu shamanism.
To close out, let's revisit that opening sequence and now annotate the details with what we've learned.
1046 BC marks the fall of the Shang Dynasty and the rise of the Zhou, the year that King Wen received revelation of the I Ching, Oracle of Changes. The 5 colors of your ritual robes represent the 5 elemental changing phases: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Jade was historically an important and valued material that Wu shamans would craft talismans with, and to this day is believed to hold powerful properties of protection. Cowrie shells were prized during the Shang Dynasty both as a form of currency and also used in divination and worn as protective talismans. Embroidered shoes called cloud shoes continue to be used today by Taoist priests during the Pacing the Big Dipper rituals. In both Chinese Tianism and Mongolian Tengrism, shamanic religions of venerating a great creator spirit of the skies, of heaven, fire was the bridge between the earthly realm and the heavenly realm, but also to the afterlife, the underworld. It's symbolic of soul, of a family or clan's ancestral spirit, and used in ritual purification. Fire is divine will. Oracle bone divination was performed by holding the scapula over a flame with tongs, and then, when heated to ready, the shaman would take it off the fire and strike it hard with an iron spike. This would crack the bone, and the bones form canals, similar to the canals designed by the legendary King Yu the Great. Like Yu the Great, you visualize a 9-sector luoshu magic square over the bone and read the bone cracks through the lens of the 9 sectors. Like feng shui, like how you might map out the underworld and upper world, and in 5-star astrology. The divination charge that we find on these ancient oracle bones evolved into the way we write decrees or petitions in Taoist Fu talisman or sigil crafting. As we've covered, the heavenly stems and earthly branches system is still used today in Taoist ritual magic. References to the Western Mother found on the Shang oracle bones and also in the I Ching Oracle of Changes evolved into the Taoist goddess Queen Mother of the West. The Zhou Dynasty rituals of invoking 4 guardian spirits per the 4 directions and 4 seasonal points was absorbed into Taoist ceremonial magic.
We've thus traced an unbroken lineage, a spiritual genealogy spanning over 3,000 years, from the oracle bones of the Shang Dynasty and Xian, the ancestor spirit or ascended master of all Wu shamans, to Taoist sorcery and spirit mediumship in the modern era. The rites of the Wu shaman were integrated into Taoist mysticism, encoded into Taoist sacred texts, and woven into the very fabric of Taoist magic. How Chinese shamans through Wuxian 3,000 years ago tracked time and read the constellations is how Taoist ceremonial magicians still work today. The celestial choreography of the Big Dipper pacing ritual is both a relic of ancient Chinese shamanism and the living tradition of Taoist occultism. Shamanism is the heartbeat of contemporary Taoist witchcraft, evolving, changing with the times, with the cultural landscape, with the politics, and it will continue to endure and change and evolve. This is why our sacred text is the Book of Changes.
This modality of shamanic witchcraft is an eternal tradition that will call out to the spiritual descendants of Wuxian, descendants who are now scattered across the world over with different faces, going by different clan names, with each of these spiritual descendants of the Wu leaning into one of the 9 or a combination of these sub-archetypes. If you are one such spiritual descendant of Wuxian, then you will hear the calling. Just as the Luo River Goddess revealed the mysteries to Yu the Great, the Lady of the 9 Heavens will reveal the mysteries to you if you should seek it.
My main purpose for sharing this video lecture is to encourage you to draw universal wisdom from Wu shamanic and Taoist traditions. In what ways does the interplay of shamanistic and Taoist traditions provide a framework for your own spiritual exploration? What are some of the ways you can extract first principles from Wu and Taoist traditions and apply them to your present-day spiritual path? Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Ignore the background. This is not a set design. This is my actual home office space, and I didn't even bother to clean it up.